Hello and welcome back to Litcast. In this episode we're going to be exploring the theme of love in An Inspector Calls. This might not be the first theme that springs to mind when you think of An Inspector Calls. And again, as with the time episode that we just did, love doesn't necessarily relate directly to context, and therefore we perhaps don't think about it as much. But it is nevertheless a theme and an important theme in the play. And it links to one of the key symbols, which is that engagement ring as well. And the fact that that engagement ring is so important at the start of the play, and then Sheila, in a big move of independence and growth, gives it back to Gerald towards the end. So the play presents a few different thoughts about love and what love actually means and constitutes to different people. And those different interpretations are really important, especially when it comes to Eva Smith. So Sheila and Gerald, all intents and purposes, appear to be in love, and their engagement seems to bring them happiness as they contemplate their future together. And after each of them has confessed to their behaviour towards Eva Smith or Daisy Renton, Sheila realises that actually they don't really know each other, which even at this time might have been fairly common, that people didn't hugely know each other. You have to remember as well, it wasn't like these aren't necessarily arranged marriages, but it's not like they're spending lots and lots of time unsupervised with each other or anything like that. This is still a time where courting is quite formal. So they don't really know each other properly as people. And that trust, which has now been lost, is that essential ingredient in a loving relationship. So it's not clear as to whether they do patch things up and get back together, or whether they're separated for good. Sheila does give the ring back to Gerald, so that's maybe an indicator. But the point is that relationship has been deeply damaged by these events. Mr. Burling's remark about the engagement of his daughter bringing the two family firms into a closer working relationship gives us an indication of his attitude towards his daughter and love and marriage. So he sees marriage as almost like a business transaction, as a convenient way of climbing that social ladder. And that really makes us wonder whether love played any real part in his marriage to Sybil Burling, and whether her coldness to everyone, including her own children, maybe has roots in her being in a loveless marriage. And it's worth maybe listening to some of the context about the role of women and the position of women in society again, just to kind of think about what that means for Sybil Burling. Both Gerald and Eric now have been involved with the girl. I'll call her Eva Smith just for the sake of ease, but of course with Gerald she's Daisy Renton. Yet each of them denies that they loved her. Their relationships were prompted simply by physical attraction. So it's that love and lust debate almost. Eva Smith took up with Eric out of necessity, because remember he says, I was in the sort of mood where a chap turns nasty. So, that's a particularly kind of traumatic moment for her. But she does sort of have feelings at least, but possibly a genuine love for Gerald. And that's where it's tricky, because the fact Gerald says that he never loved her means that Gerald very much manipulated her and did wrong by her simply by keeping her at his convenience for a few months and then dropping her when he was done. So Gerald's ending of the affair can really be seen as quite callous, because he must have known that there would have been feelings there, whether he chooses to admit that or not. And the inspector also preaches a form of love. So this sort of sense of loving each other. And again, if we think about the the very Christian message of being members of one body. By that same token, the Christian message of love one another as I have loved you kind of comes out indirectly. The inspector doesn't say that, but it comes out indirectly in his words. This idea of caring deeply for fellow human beings, which is quite alien in particular to Mrs. Burling, who is prepared to devote time to charity, but doesn't actually have any care for the people that the charity is meant to support. So that is how love is potentially presented, and there's a few lovely moments, things like where Gerald and Sheila talk, where he gives her the engagement ring and she says something like, "Is it the one you wanted me to have?" So that conversation right at the start in Act 1, or then later on, if we're thinking about Gerald and Daisy Renton, Eva Smith, he talks about, "It's hard to say. I didn't feel about her as she felt about me." So he clearly understood that she had feelings, and he just let that play out so that he could get what he wanted. Whereas Eric is more straightforward, saying, "I wasn't in love with her or anything, but I liked her. She was pretty and a good sport." So think about both the contrast in those two men's attitudes towards Eva Smith, Daisy Renton, or think about what that says about their attitudes towards working class women, and their kind of rights, or even just their rights as a man in general, because the gender and the class are two different kind of areas really that intersect when it comes to issues with rights and prejudice and things like that. Okay, so that's just a few notes on the theme of love in An Inspector Calls. That's another theme done. We've got just one or two more themes to look at for An Inspector Calls. Thank you so much for listening. I hope these are useful to you. Remember, if you have any suggestions for episodes that you would like to hear going forward, then please use the comments or voice notes function on Spotify, the comments on YouTube, or use the polls that I usually put up every few episodes with things that you want to see next. Thank you once again, and I'll see you in the next one. Listening to Litcast, the podcast for GCSE and A-level revision. The music that you hear in this episode is called Galaxy and was written by Ixon, and you can find the rest of his music on SoundCloud. You can also find us on other social media channels, including YouTube, where you'll also find our Litcast live episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you again.